All right, here we are again with our little plaster mold, and we got it off the board. I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna hope that that leaf does not pull out of there. So I'm gonna kind of peel back that the leaf stays embedded in the plaster. All right, so I can break off some of this excess that I over poured. Leave that over there. Now I can see here, there's a little spot where the plaster went underneath. And this part's popping up already. So there's a little bit of problems. This leaf is really thin, so I might just end up using this as an open face mold. But what we're going to do to keep, one, we don't want the plaster, I'm going to put another layer of plaster in here, I don't want it to stick to this plaster. So I'm going to use some petroleum jelly. It's going to create a barrier so the plaster doesn't bond into the other plaster. It still can become mechanically locked. But I'm also going to try to use it as glue to kind of hold down that darn leaf. And I want to be careful creating too much texture, although I could build up some texture so that the leaf was a little bit thicker. There we go, shot from above. Alright, so because the leaf is so thin, it's not casting. Although I did try it, just because I'm stubborn. But I'm going to build up the material with a little bit of clay after this first part of the mold. So I'm going to take a little bit of clay. I'm going to... Alright, so we got the clay wall and built up a little bit of thickener in there, clay wall around. And remember to put the petroleum jelly on the plaster so it doesn't stick again with the plaster. Got a good island in there, at least I think so. Stir that up. This time I built a little bit higher wall. I'm gonna go for it. Pour it in there. Made it a little thicker this time because I'm tired of waiting. If you mix, the other thing with plaster, if you mix it up thicker, so it was a little bit more like a milkshake there than just a thick milk, it'll set faster too. So if you're really in a hurry and you don't mind wasting plaster, but if it's too thick when you pour it, you might lose detail. So be careful. Trial and error. All right. All right, so here's our little mold again, and we can peel the clay away from the sides. Anyway, so sometimes this will just pop apart. It did. If it hadn't have just popped apart, I could use a screwdriver to kind of pry in, but don't use one spot. Work your way around slowly. But luckily for us, it just popped apart. So I'm going to make sure that I have a pouring cup, and I'm going to carve out this out a little bit wider here, right where that is, and I'm actually going to make a small hole at the bottom because this is so thin. I want air to flow out. Now you could make vents that went back up to the top. If you had a bigger mold, you'd have vents. You could actually put a few vents off to the sides too. That's where air can come out. Now it's going to leak, but the wax is going to cool off fairly quickly in these thin little lines. So the air will escape, and then the wax hopefully will flow into these a little bit and then just cool off. So it doesn't just continually flow out. Also, I don't want the wax to stick to the plaster. I don't want it to soak in. So I'm going to soak the plaster in water so that it's saturated in water. Then again, I'm going to use the syringe to give me a little bit of pressure. We'll see. Again, those pressurized pots. Now this is soaked in, I soaked the plaster in water so that it was saturated pretty well. I just made the mold, so it's pretty saturated water. If you had a mold that had been sitting out, you made a while ago, and had been sitting out and was dry, like bone dry, make sure to let it soak for a while. Make sure this is working. And then all right, we'll let that cool for a little bit. All right. So here we go. This is the kind of redone with the built up a little bit thicker kind of wax leaf. So I've still got some more of the veins on the one side, the other side not so much, but at least it's a little bit thicker than a cast. I'm probably going to go on a little thinner. I can carve back into this and put some textures and such in that. And I can use the tools to carve away this flashing if I want to, or exaggerate it maybe. So anyway, that's our little tiny mold to get a little form. In comparison, here's some, these are still quite thin. These were some leaves that were dipped in wax. So a lot of the detail did get obliterated with that. You can kind of, a little bit, some characteristics of these, and these are still really thin that they might not completely cast. But, yeah, they might. It's always interesting what things can work and what things don't work sometimes. You get lucky. Right, oh, and this was, let's go back to this guy. This was the second silly putty mold, press mold, kind of to experiment with that a little bit more. So that came out a little bit better. I just pressed it in without moving it around. Anyway, take care.